So there's another element of this that I think we need to touch on, and that's how you're holding onto the handlebar, right? And there's some people who advocate you should have no weight on the handlebars ever. And even under braking, you just squeeze the tank with your knees so you can have no weight on your handlebars. I disagree, quite honestly. I think you need to have some weight in your handlebars. I mean, you don't want to be death gripping it, but even in the corner, like I want my arms loose, but I still want to have contact with the handlebars so I can identify the information. If I'm super light on the handlebars, I'm going to miss stuff.
Yep.
Right. I need to have some level of grip, not death grip, but it's again finding this like little threshold of like what is the right amount of pressure on the handlebars, right? And it's why or how your body is put together, the way your muscles and your arm work. And I know some very fast riders don't ride this way, but you're better off holding onto the handlebar with your ring and pinky fingers. Like that's where your strength comes from because it's actually attached to the big muscle in your forearm, where your pointer and ring finger are really more precision fingers. They have more feel. Right. So I want to be holding on with those two fingers, but like one or two finger are usually out over a lever or I'm getting ready to. I'm not always covering the brake on the track.
Right.
But I am like under braking or as I'm trail braking in, I'm still holding on to the handlebar in a relatively real way so I can feel what's going on. Yep. I'm not trying to be ultra light on the handlebars all the time.
So I think it's I think we've gone a whole podcast so far and you've not said it depends, Dave.
I haven't said it depends, but it depends. Everything depends.
But I would say this one, it does depend.
It does depend, yeah.
Especially in the context of what you're doing or where you are.
100%.
Right? If you're on the street and you're like, I gotta lock my arms before I brake for this corner.
You shouldn't be braking that hard on the street. Yeah,
don't back off a little.
Bring it down. Bring it down.
But when you're at a track in a controlled, safer space and that's where you go if you want to push and you want to try to push faster, right? That's where you do it. If you are able to go into a really hard straight line braking zone and you have no weight on your hands, I would argue that you are probably not braking as hard as you can.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, someone might say, oh, well, you should have light hands on the track too. Sure. But your goal must not be to go as fast as you possibly can because that is not braking very hard.
Right.
Right. I don't know anybody who can, and I run all kinds of grips on my tank. I've 3D printed different tank shapes before for myself. I've done all kinds of stuff. I promise you, when I'm braking really hard, there is weight on my hands. I can't.
There has to be, but it's also how the weight comes in. You don't want you want the weight to kind of be directly going into the bones on your
palm of your hand.
On the palm, like at the heel of your hand, even.
Yep.
So that the pressure is going right into the bones and the muscles, so everything's stronger. Whereas if it's up too high, you're going to get wrist flex, or if it's too low, your hand could go over the top of it. So there's a technique to it, but yeah, and think about it, even on the street, how many times on the street did you have to maybe brake harder than you were planning because something unexpected happened? And I want my hands and arms and fingers all in the appropriate place so that I'm prepared to adjust to whatever variable that just came up in front of me.
Yeah. So for sure, you're going to have load in your hands when you're braking. It's funny as you're talking about this. I don't think we've talked about this in the podcast ever. This goes to a point that it's usually one of the first things that I talk to with a newer track rider at the track is if they're struggling with, I'm not comfortable, I don't feel good braking, list of reasons, is if we go look at their bike and they think, I don't think I'm quite sitting where I should. Your bars, if they're clip-ons, or if there's a handlebar, the tube is shaped the way that it is, you can still roll it forward and back, and that can make a big difference.
You can go to a dirt bike shop, and there's probably 50 different handlebar bends you could choose from.
Bars are not expensive, guys. It is not as big a deal.
It's crazy how customizable you can get. Because everyone has a different wrist angle to this point, right? Like, I think you run your handlebars in.
No, I run mine super
you run yours
flat.
way out. I run mine in further because my wrist angle, it hurts to run them way out.
Yep.
But like biomechanics, this is a factor.
Yeah, no, we've a friend of ours, Jerry, who's significantly taller than me. He races with me. He will run his bars in a position that I feel like a child on his bike because they're so far forward. So there is like a too much. It's not just like always go flatter and wider, right? There's a limit. And like you're saying, like everyone's built a little different. But I find a lot of times if your bars are, and if this is making sense, think about holding the bars and sweeping them in. If you like, my elbows come in naturally when I do that,
Hmm.
and now I'm trying to like push from this angle. I am much more in control if I've got a not totally wide, but a more flared out elbow, just
Right.
so I've got a little more leverage on the
Yeah.
bar. That can also make the biggest difference in your feel of the front end. And I've ran into this a ton of times with people where just by rotating the bars wider a couple of degrees, not a ton, a little bit, suddenly they feel better on braking, they feel better on turning, they can feel what the front end's doing more because they're not like this jammed
Yeah,
up.
I think most people run them in too tight, if
Yeah.
I'm being honest with you. And you can actually do a little test at home. Like find the width of your handlebars or whatever on your clip-ons or whatever. And if you put your hands on the table in front of you at roughly that width, you can measure the sweep of your angle where your knuckles are, where your hand's going to be the most comfortable in that position.
Oh, interesting.
So like everyone's wrist shape is different, right? And it's like we do this with like I know for a fact that my wrists are weird and I have to run more sweep than most people, more sweep than I would honestly like to, but it hurts to be out too
Yep.
far. It's painful.
Yeah, yeah.
When I did the Grom race with Honda, those Groms, the clip-ons were almost arrow straight. My wrists hurt so bad. I was in like agony because it was too far out. Everyone else thought they were awesome. And I'm like, I can't, this is really, but you can find out, you can figure out where because when your body is in kind of this neutral ergonomic position, you're going to have more strength naturally
Yep.
because everything's in the position where it's designed to work.
Now, you could do a little quick search on YouTube because if now you're curious, geez, are my bars in the wrong spot? Have they been in the wrong spot this whole time?
Right.
There's probably about 5 different tests that people say you can do to figure out where should they be.
Like
to
push-up test
experiment.
is the one I've always
Yeah,
used.
I've seen a bunch of different ones. I'm not saying any of them are right or wrong, but just find something that works for you and just don't be afraid to experiment.
Right. Play with it. Absolutely. Right. It's, mountain bikes for me, that was where the push-up test, because everyone's like, oh, like I'm not a very big guy, but I run a wider bar
Mhm.
for whatever reason. I just find it's so much more comfortable to run a wider bar with a little bit more sweep.
Yep.
Right. And then you can pick. Same thing with like if you have a street bike that has tube bars, any dirt bike shop, like Pro Taper is the company that comes to mind. They'll have like this display of 50
Yeah.
different Pro Taper bars,
Yep.
all with a different angle. One will be like some of them are named after famous racers, and you can find the bar angle that works for you, and it's awesome to have that flexibility. A clip-on, most of them, they clip onto the top triple clamps on a sport bike. They're pinned from the factory.
Yep.
They usually have pins that limit how much they can rotate. You can either cut the pins off, or you can get aftermarket clip-ons and rotate them to whatever angle works for you. It's a big deal. It makes a difference.
Yep. Now, I will say if you are running stock ones, you can cut the pin off, like Dave's saying, but then just be mindful because there's usually those stock clip-ons have a single bolt.
Right, to hold them on. Yeah, it's true.
Just be careful that you don't like put yourself into a bad spot with
Well,
them.
and ironically, this is a funny little thing. I bought, when I was building my Aprilia RSV4, I bought the clip-ons, that 0-degree clip-ons that everybody swore by.
Yeah.
I put them on, and again, they hurt my wrist like crazy. And you're like, I gave them to you. You gave me your OEM
The street
clip-ons.
ones, yeah.
So I still have the pins, whatever.
Happy
Where
as can
Aprilia,
be.
I'm totally,
Yeah.
they're exactly where I want them.
What Dave's talking about with the 0-degree ones is now we're getting way on the weeds here. If you look at a clip-on, typically the clip-on clips onto the forked tube, like this, and then the bar is mounted usually in front of it and it sweeps back. The 0 degrees, the way the bar mounts is actually kind of in line. It's almost like it's coming off tangent from the fork tube itself. So what it does is effectively just sweeps the bars back towards you slightly and gives you a lot of times more clearance from fairings and gas tanks and stuff. That's the main difference. I run 0-degree ones. I like them better.
Yeah, most people like them better. Yeah. But again, just because the majority does a thing, I mean, this is getting a little philosophical, but riding well is not a majority rules thing, right? Just because the majority of people do something one way doesn't necessarily make it the best method. If we look at the best riders in the world, they're almost outliers in a certain degree because they're not doing what the majority is doing, right?